Hello everyone and welcome back to another deck guide, this time featuring both White Forest and Dogmatika for Genesys. These two light spellcaster decks have some incidental synergy, with White Forest being able to search the Dogmatika starter and then her summoning herself because one of our synchros is on the field. So if you want to just make the most layered disruptions possible, then let's get started. We'll start off with the White Forest engine. These ladies are centered around sending spells and traps to the graveyard for value, as well as synchro summoning and recurring spells, traps, and bodies from grave. Starting with our best starter, Astellar is our normal summon of choice and can ignition speed send a spell trap from hand or field to grave to summon a light spellcaster tuner from deck. That can bridge into a lot of archetypes like Centurion, Blue Eyes, or Branded, but we're staying in engine with it. Then, after you use her as material, she can come back once per turn when you send a spell trap for cost, which helps us synchro climb. Next up is LZ, who can summon from hand and add a White Forest monster by sending a spell trap from hand or field to grave. Rather than summoning from grave, she adds back to hand on the opponent's turn if you summon a light spellcaster tuner. Sylvie is our other normal summon and our first tuner. She adds a spell trap on summon and can return a synchro from grave or field to deck to summon herself back once per turn. Ruchia can do the same thing, but instead of searching, she can summon from hand if you have a White Forest already, and she can send a spell trap to draw a card. Notably, both tuners are level 4 and both non-tuners are level 2. This specializes us in synchro 6s, but makes other even numbers possible as well. Our last White Forest monster is Diabelle's the White Witch. Generally, White Forest is the best home for the Diabelle sub-archetype, and you can include these cards down here to unlock some extra plays, but we're playing a more synchro-focused version instead just because we don't have a whole ton of room and we don't want to play bricks, basically. That said, Diabelle's protects all of our monsters from being destroyed as long as we have 2 Diabelle names on board. She counts as 1, and the White Forest big boss out of the extra deck is number 2. She can summon herself from hand by sending a spell trap similar to LZ, and on summon she can foolish a Sinful Spoils card. For us that's going to be Morian, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Then we're on to the spells, which we have 1 Tails, which is our archetypal Rhoda, but we have to have an illusion or spellcaster on board to use it, so it isn't a starter and we most often just search it as part of our combo. It also sets itself when sent to grave as cost, which lets us avoid sending off our entire hand for our combo. Peri Ray's map isn't archetypal, but it lets us search Astellar, so it acts as 3 more starters. In Genesys, White Forest has a hard time finding starters because of the cost of Diabelle Star and the Azamina cards, so we need map to bring us up to 12, which is the minimum I feel comfortable playing with. That gives us an 85% chance to see at least 1 starter per game, or 5 out of 6 games roughly, and we do have some 2 cards and partial combos to cover that 6th one. For traps we have Woes of the White Forest, which also sets itself when sent to grave, and lets you summon a White Forest from deck, then you can synchro summon a White Forest card if you want using materials already on your board. This card is so good and flexible, and I play 3 even though it isn't a starter because it can turn a half board into a full one on the opponent's turn. It lets you get Diabelle straight from the deck, it lets you synchro for disruption or follow-up, it really just does everything. Lastly is the one of Morian we send off of Diabelle's. It can set itself from grave as long as you have a high-level illusion like the Diabelle's herself, and lets you Book of Moon a special summon monster. It's fairly simple, but it helps us layer our disruptions, which is what this deck is really good at. Now we're onto the small toy box engine. This is one of my favorite packages in the game, but it really only works in White Forest. It consists of 2 monsters and toy box itself, which let's go over that one first. It's a continuous spell that lets us set the monsters as spells in our back row from hand, deck, or grave, or it lets us destroy 2 of our own back row. Both of the monsters special summon out if they were first set, then sent to grave, and interestingly, Toy Box's effect is a soft once per turn, which means that 2 of them can act as a starter by having one set the monsters, then the other destroy the monsters to get out 2 bodies. The last effect on the box itself is to once per turn send a card to grave to destroy an attacking monster, which is just even more protection for our board alongside activating one of our toys. The monsters themselves each have an effect that gets better if the box is already on the field. When summoned, Soldier adds Toy Box to hand, or if you already have it out, you can add any level 4 light monster, of which we have plenty. Toy Tank can tribute itself to summon a level 6 or below from hand, or if we already have box out, it can summon from grave as well. That lets us get bodies on board that we need to keep comboing. All in all, a really neat and unique package that gives us a ton of material to send for the White Forest while also gaining extra value along the way and adding some 2-card starters. Then we have the Dogmatikas. These are focused on extra deck hate, and many even lock us out of our own extra deck, which is why we always use them at the end of our White Forest lines and not before. Ecclesia is our searchable starter that can't be destroyed in battle with an extra deck monster, and if one is on the field, she can special from hand. When summoned, she can add any Dogmatika card, but does lock you out of the extra deck for the rest of the turn. We play 3 because she allows us to pivot if the White Forest stuff gets interrupted, and we can search plenty of other cards instead if we open a copy. Notably, the Dogmatikas are where we spend a good number of our points, and Ecclesia herself is 3 a pop. One Maximus is normally our search off of Ecclesia, and we can summon him by banishing an extra deck monster from our graveyard. That allows us to activate him to send 2 cards from both extra decks to the grave. Ours is stacked with stuff that gets extra value when we send it. While this makes our opponent choose cards to lose options, it's kind of a weird disruption, but it's better than it looks at first glance if people are loading their extra deck with a bunch of one-ofs. We're playing both versions of Fleur-de-Lis, starting with the Knighted. Knighted can summon from hand if there's an extra deck monster on board, and then can non-targeting negate an opponent's monster as part of the summon as long as you have another Dogmatika name on board. Less importantly, she gives all of your Dogmatikas another 500 attack once per turn whenever one of them attacks. That attack is permanent, so if the game goes a couple of turns, all of your stuff gets big. We can also search her on end phase for use as a very good hand trap that comes with a big body for follow-up. The Thunderbolt is also something of a hand trap, except this one lets you play on turn 0. If an extra deck monster is on board, you can special summon her from hand, then when summoned she can set a trap from the deck, and the trap is immediately live if the opponent has a high attack extra deck monster on board. While we search her as part of our end board, we also don't mind just dropping Dogmatika Punishment on an opponent on turn 0. Well, what does that do, you ask? Well, Dogmatika Punishment lets you target a monster and send one from your extra deck with a higher attack to grave to destroy it. Whatever we send to grave gives us additional value in various forms like destruction or searching, so this is just a 2-for-1 every single time, but we have to be careful since it locks us out of the extra deck until the end of next turn, which locks us into playing just Dogmatika for a round. Last up is the new Quadogmatika Beast, which lets us summon back a monster from grave or banishment by sending a monster from deck or extra deck to grave with equal or higher attack. The idea here is that if we need to banish a White Forest Synchro for Maximus, we can then get it back on the opponent's turn by setting this off of Thunderbolt. That lets you do some neat tricks as well that we'll talk about in the extra deck. Last up for Engine, we just play 1 Manadium Reframing. It's searchable off Amritara and is just an Omni-Negate counter trap as long as we have a Synchro on board, which, spoiler alert, we always will. Notably, this is our only out to evenly match, so it's pretty crucial to our end board. We have 7 non-engine, which probably seems low, but we're really good at breaking a board in engine, and we don't really want to go over 40 with a low number of starters. 1 Veiler is searchable in engine, Darkhole is a steal at 3 a pop, and can be discarded if we're going first, and Ultimate Slayer is free for some reason and can also be discarded if we're going first. That brings us to the extra deck. Zappy Boy can be summoned on the opponent's turn to pop a spell trap and lets us quick synchro. Then Risiella is the glue that holds this deck together. On special summon, she can send a spell trap from hand or field to grave to add any White Forest card or any light spellcaster from deck to hand. That is almost every single monster in the main deck. This is how we normally bridge from White Forest combo into Dogmatika if we don't just open an Ecclesia. She also gives our Spellcaster and Illusion Synchros 500 attack and makes them indestructible, which includes herself and the rest of the White Forest Syncs. Notably, her search effect is on special summon and not on synchro summon. That means we can use her as material, then banish her for Maximus, then summon her back off of Dogmatika Beast and search another card like your one of Valor, for example. Next up is Silvera, which books all of your opponent's monsters on summon, which is exceedingly easy to do in the middle of their turn, or when you're going second to act as a pseudo Zeus. She also gives all of your illusion and spellcaster synchros 500 more attack and double piercing to make closing out the game trivial after the book effect. Stardust Charge Warrior draws a card on summon, so we climb through him on our way to 10s, and then Malong is an Ultimate Slayer target that bounces a card and could be used to modulate levels to get to a 9 or 11, but our extra deck is pretty tight to try that, so we're not playing any of those. Then Visas searches reframing that can be used to either make a level 10 synchro, or to pop itself to give us something to banish for Maximus. Diabell is the big boss for White Forest, and on summon, if you used a synchro tuner like one of our 6s, you can add a spell trap from grave back to hand. Any spell trap whatsoever, which is really cool. That lets you recur something that you pitched earlier for your combo, and then when she's on field, whenever your opponent activates a card or effect, you can summon a Synchro Tuner from the extra deck, just straight up. That's normally Zapper Shrimp, which then pops a spell trap, and then we can quick sync with the Diabell into one of our 10s, but it can also be Silvera to book their entire board, or Malong for whatever reason. Shenging is one of the best generic 10s, costs nothing, and we can make him easily to be big, protected, and banish the opponent's cards. Chaos Angel is our normal summon off of Zapper Shrimp to banish a card in the middle of the opponent's turn, and sticks around to protect our synchros from monster effects. Lulua Lilith is our 12 of choice and can negate a card when something leaves the extra deck, and if sent to grave either from field or straight from the extra deck by a Dogmatika effect, lets you summon a light spellcaster on the end phase as long as its attack and defense are equal. That lets us get Astellar for White Forest combo, Ecclesia for Dogmatika combo, or Thunderbolt to set a trap that becomes live as soon as the phase ends. The rest of these are all just to be sent to grave for Dogmatika and Ultimate Slayer. Natis costs us 7, but it's worth it to destroy a card when she's sent to grave. Garura draws us a card when sent to grave. Titaniclad searches or summons a Dogmatika monster on end phase after being sent. Dogma searches any Dogmatika on end phase. Both of these cost us 10, but it's worth it since we normally send them off of Maximus to search both versions of Fleur-de-Lis to give us a strong board that comes straight out of the hand on the opponent's turn. Aggregator is a Slayer target that negates a card on the field, and that's it. Let's go see a combo or two. Alright, so this is the only combo I'm going to bother showing you. It just kind of shows you where you're trying to get to, and the combo lines in this deck are very, very flexible dependent on what your opening hand looks like. Just as a note, you pretty much always will need one spell trap just to pitch for the White Forest combo, for any White Forest combo. That's why we have 21 spell traps in the deck, just to make sure we always have something to discard. So, let's get started. We're going to normal summon Astellar and pitch our random card to go summon Sylvie from the deck. Sylvie's going to add Tales of the White Forest. Then we can synchro into Risiella, pitch the Tails to search Ecclesia for later. Tails is going to set itself, and Astellar will summon herself back. Then we can activate Tails to get Diabells. We can then go into Diabell, Queen of the White Forest, to add back Tails so that we can pitch it one more time for the Diabells, which means we now have 2 Diabells on field, and then we can send Morian, which sets itself. Then we can summon out Ecclesia on this board because we're not going to be using the extra deck anymore, and then we can banish the Risiella for Maximus. Maximus sends 2 cards from the extra deck to the graveyard, which allows us to search both Fleur-de-Lis, and then on the opponent's turn, we have, like, all of our stuff is protected. We've got a Book of Moon. We can summon out Diabell, which can summon out Zapper Shrimp, which can summon out Chaos Angel, or we can just summon out Silvera. On top of all of that, we can use Fleur-de-Lis whenever the opponent does something to set a trap, and then if somehow they have, like, broken our board and they're starting to build up an extra deck monster, then Fleur-de-Lis can activate the trap that you set immediately, which can get us either a Valor by summoning back Risiella off of Dogmatika Beast, or it can get us just Dogmatica Punishment, which represents 2 disruptions on its own. So very layered end board that it kind of looks weird that we have all of these random bodies on board. Anytime you're playing Dogmatica, this is going to happen because they can't go into the extra deck to get rid of the bodies that you're using. But just in general, very scary, disruptive board that comes straight out of the hand on top of them having to deal with the stuff that's already on field. It's very neat. And we're back with closing thoughts on our White Force Dogmatica deck. Probably a pretty quick one here because I think I've gotten my thoughts out generally pretty well throughout the video. But I do enjoy this deck. I like the fact that most of our stuff can search various cards. It's not like a particular combo line. It's just accruing resources, and if we happen to draw certain ones, we can search other ones, which is pretty neat. I like the Quadogmatica Beast. I don't know if this is going to be correct to do forever, but I wanted to try it because it's a new card that looked like it had some strong potential to gain value by sending from the extra deck while also recovering one of our synchros that we have had to banish, or, you know, even if just like a Fleur-de-Lis gets banished and you bring her back, then you can still set punishment, and that's still very good, especially because you're gaining extra value. So we break boards in Engine pretty easily just because we constantly get value from sending things to the graveyard. So our 5-card hand can sometimes look closer to like an 8-card hand, and sometimes, especially in Genesys, people just don't have the resources on their end board to stop a quote-unquote 8-card hand, which is pretty cool. That's why we can get away with just the 7 non-engine, plus Fleur-de-Lis if you want to consider her a hand trap, because we don't really need the help. We just make Silvera, and because not that many people have straight up negates, like destroying Silvera doesn't do anything, bouncing her doesn't do anything, sending her doesn't do anything. If we can make a Synchro 6, we're just gonna book their board, and that's really scary for a lot of decks. So, you know, very fun deck. It's not the easiest thing in the world to play, especially like the toy boxes can be unintuitive to use. But if you're up for a challenge and you like gaining value at cost, if you like something like Mermail, which does that a lot, which is basically unplayable in this format, this is kind of a similar vibe. White Forest in general is kind of a similar vibe, and I like the Dogmaticas. I think they're pretty neat, being able to rip stuff from the opponent's extra deck. The only real thing I want to mention as kind of a complaint, and it's not even with the deck itself, it's the fact that ritual stuff is so expensive in Genesys that we can't just play Dogmatica, because Dogmatica Pure, if you're not aware, is a ritual deck. They've got very scary ritual boss monsters, but like we just can't really access them because how much generic ritual support costs in Genesys for no real reason that I can tell. So, you know, I wish we could play Dogmatica Purer in this format. You could definitely play White Forest Purer. If you do that, you start to add like the Diabell support like these guys, which gives you extra disruptions and things like that. But you really can't just play pure Dogmatica, which kind of sucks. But, you know, this is a pretty fun version anyways. So, with that, guys, I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.